Well, we all know the month of March we celebrate Women's Day, and I must say, and I'm happy, and you must have seen an announcement on the all the platforms of Humans of Indian Football that we are coming up with a new series, looking at the entire month of March, where we are celebrating either women who worked in Indian football or men and women who've invested in women's football. Now, in to kickstart and kick off that series, I am privileged and much in with great pleasure I invite my first guest on this special series, a senior journalist known for her writings. We also now see her face on the 420 Grams podcast talking about Indian football. She's definitely written a lot about Indian football as well. Sharda Ugra, thank you so much and welcome to the Totally Indian Football Show.
Hi, Siju. Thank you for all those sort of words. I feel very happy and grateful to be part of the Indians of Humans of Indian Football and to be part of this show because I'm a newcomer almost to Indian football, I have to say, and it has been such a welcome and it's been such a whole new world that I have discovered and I'm still discovering and it's great to be chatting with you here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the pleasure is all mine. I think since this is going to be a story about people who we feature, I think we can have a lot of anecdotes back and forth. I first saw you. Of course, I knew your name. I've heard about you, but I first met you at the Under 17 Men's World Cup in Kochi, and the two of us were the only women in the entire press box. I'm sure you've had experience of that, since the 80s and since the 90s you've been working. And I think it was a rainy day. You were in Kochi to cover the Spain versus Brazil game, and it was a rainy day after the game, and we were, I think, waiting under a shed, and I think that's where we first spoke. Probably helloed each other, maybe in the press box, but I think we first spoke there. And after that, I don't see you. Then I realized, oh, you're only there for that big game. But it's been such a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure keeping in touch with you because you've been that person where I go to or run to in case I need an advice, in case whatever. So I must tell all the listeners when I left my job the last one, I had a good time of chat with Sharda just to understand. And with all due respect, it's her who've told me I'm not supposed to call her ma'am. So I call her by name, but with utmost respect. Sharda, you're in love with cricket. And I was reading some articles. I've also read the article where an excerpt where you've written part of writing where I think the women are featured who've embraced singlehood and how beautifully you've mentioned about your love story with cricket. So, since this is a totally Indian football show, we'll stick to only Indian football. What made you write or want to report on Indian football then?
I remember meeting you, Siju, very clearly in Kochi, and I was so happy to see another women reporter there. I remember standing under the shed. I think maybe we were waiting for a cab to turn up or for it to stop raining or whatever it was. And, something of that sort. And it wasn't that I only covered the big games, but yeah, it was a good game to cover. And then I had to go and do another one. I think the one that got rained off in Guwahati, that was the next one that I had to do. What makes me interested in Indian football is I knew things about it, but of course I was when I began my career I was primarily doing a lot of cricket, both for Midday newspaper where I started, and then for India Today magazine, and then of course Cricket for was full cricket. But with ESPN setting up the multi-sport Indian website, we got a chance to do football and to see this completely distant and different world that there was. And I knew, for example, when I was growing up, I was reading sports magazines, so I knew of Jamshed Nasiri and I knew of Chima Okeri, and you knew that there were these big names that were there, but you didn't follow it as closely. But my sort of love affair, almost you can say, it's with Indian football is very very recent, right? And it started because I said, look, I want to know why how come there are, not why, how is it that there are so many football players from the Northeast? And of course, because my organization was kind enough to let me chase this story, which is, you can write it in 500 words or you can write it in 5,000 words. And then stumbling upon that, then of course the ISL was also happening in and around, and I wanted to figure out what was happening there. BFC had just started in 2013, 1 year, 2 years before the ESPN website began, the multi-sport website began. So there were all these things that were there at the time. It was good timing, and I was completely enchanted by everything about Indian football, its history, its legacy, its heritage, the stories about it, the standard that the Indians were at in Asia in the 1960s, and of course the state at where we are now. And I must also say this, that I find that of all the athletes that I meet and speak to, and that includes cricketers, I find that it's our footballers who have what we call the maximum agency. They are the most free speaking kind of people that you will see for whatever those various reasons that are. And I enjoy chatting with them. And yeah, so it's not stopped. And I'm a bit of a BFC kind of tragic. I follow their games. I don't follow European football as much as a lot of younger people these days tend to do. I'm not a big fan of European football. I was to watch World Cups like some sad person. Every 4 years, I'll watch World Cup with great interest. But I'm not. I wasn't that kind. But yeah, but now I follow the story of BSC. I follow I League, some I League clubs. See what else is new, and I find it absolutely fascinating. And I find it's just waiting to be and the 420 guys are terrific because they invite me on their show, and I always go there as the outsider, but they make me feel welcome. And yeah, it's been great fun. And I learn a lot every time that I have a conversation with anyone connected with Indian football, and that includes you, Siju.
Great. Yeah. I'm happy and privileged to be in that list now. Well, I think it's definitely a good eye, or rather, yeah, a good eye to have, when you call yourself an outsider on the 420 grams, or an outsider in terms of Indian football per se. Uh, because it's always good that, somebody from outside, it's only when we listen that, hey, things are not going well. Because you're not someone who, when you write a story, it's definitely worth reading. Um, I mean, whether it's cricket or football, but particularly with Indian football, there's so much mess around. Not that other sports don't have, but here clearly people are not talking enough about it. Even if they are, they're shunned. So when Sharda Ugra takes up the responsibility to write about it, I think it definitely calls for all the eyes and all the the reads that it deserves. When you mentioned about you being a World Cup freak, I think I stumbled upon one of the article that starts with saying you're a World Cup junkie. So I think there's no harm to that at all. When talking about the Under 17 Men's World Cup, right? You travel to places and covered that event. It again, you call yourself a World Cup junkie, and you were right there, whether irrespective of what age group that was. Uh, Take us through the Under 17 Men's World Cup through the lens of Sharda.
So I was coming into, I knew the games that I had to do. So the Brazil versus Spain was the big game. And I literally looked at it almost from a point of view, very forensically, shall we say, as to this is the event I have to cover. I know very little about it, so let me now try and learn. So I did as much of reading as I could, but I mean, on the internet, off the internet fundamentally, because that's all that there was, to get me some more information about the teams that I was going to report on. Right. So England was one of them. So I happened to speak to the England coach. We set up an interview and because of course it's ESPN, you managed to get that. It's not a problem. And I set up an interview with him, and he told me about their program and how they were trying to do it. And this was all pre the Southgate thing that happened at the Euros a couple of years ago. So I knew that whole story that had started from that time, what was happening in their training center and so on. So I did all that, and I was also able to see. I mean, I thought the press conferences were fantastic because, of course, people who go to football press conferences come away really bored and whatever. But it was my first one. So first of all, you're listening to people speaking in completely different languages. And the other impression I got was that the Brazilian team, the best media manager, the best organized media person that they had was the Brazilian contingent, right? Whether they gave you information or not, but they were always responding and telling you things and whatever. So what I enjoyed about was seeing. I remember seeing Mexico play as well. They had a very good player. Of course, now I've forgotten his name. Very good young player that they had, and I remember watching all the matches and just being astonished by the sort of the quality of football that was there. There were fewer fouls. So it was easy on the eye in many ways. I like the whole different approach that global football, you were able to see the scale and the range of global football and where all these kids come from and how they're all there. And with Brazil, you got a sense of the grandeur of Brazilian football because they were so aware of who they were on the world stage. And this is an under 17 team. This is not even, their main team or their star player. These are just kids. But the manager, the captain, whoever their media guy was, they just had an awareness of what they stand for Brazil, and I just loved that. I thought they were like footballing royalty, in that sense, and they conducted themselves very well, and so on. Then so I had those games. I went to Guwahati because it rained off that one match. I was just astonished by the sort of the professionalism that was involved in putting together this event, like that your training pitches had to be perfect, or as close to perfect, and we hadn't seen that. No, so I remember going around, I think bits of Kochi it may have been, and I think I went to a training pitch at Guwahati as well. So I saw all the sort of substructures and the things that were going on around putting this event into place and what it meant. And I also realized that a lot of the teams, which of course, as did everyone else, that a lot of the teams came into the tournament without any of the almost the paraphernalia and the build up and all that the poor Indian boys had to go through. That they came from very robust footballing cultures, which helped eventually in how we turned out. I didn't get to do the final, but it was a great match. It was fabulous, and you never saw, so when everyone was surprised seeing England play the way they played, you had seen a reflection or some kind of sort of signs of it when that under 17 team played. Yeah, you saw Phil Foden now plays professional football and there was Sancho and the Sancho, Foden, and there's one more boy. And so you saw sort of shades of that and how it played out. And you saw that the footballing cultures that all these countries came from, what they represented, was much deeper and much deeper and much richer than the Indian footballing culture. Not because our football players have not got sort of the history behind them, but they haven't been given the ground, that kind of ground to stand on and work with, and doing a lot of the football stories that I did, a lot of them were around the northeast as well, in Assam and so on. And it's so easy to see what is lacking, and it's so frustrating to see that no one's doing anything to push it more aggressively, and all we are doing is holding big events. That's not really. And we saw what happened at the AFC Champions, AFC Asian Cup, Women's Asian Cup, and you saw what happened to the Indian team. I mean, I could start ranting here. I know you asked me to speak on the 2017 World Cup, and it's been good to see some of the 2017 Indian boys come through and play well. But I think you saw in all those sort of profusion and in all that was before us, a global football talent came to our doors. We saw how we had left our younger players, not the ones that we had picked, but the ones just one layer behind them, 2 years, 3 years younger than them. How much we'd left, the big gap that we'd left, that was left there, and the big difference that there was. So you saw that in many ways at that event.
Yeah, I mean, Indian football and ranting goes hand in hand, Sharda. So you don't have to apologize ever for going on a rant, and we are right here to hear all of that. Uh, but as you mentioned, right, your love affair with Indian football or the writing part came with writing about the northeast side of stories, and you also mentioned it's so easy to see what is lacking. And it's also good to write about it because it needs to be highlighted, right? It's not all rosy and good. And the two stories out of which one you wrote was Assam football, right? And it was titled "The Abandoned Gold Mine of Indian Football," and it's so true. I mean, when you say we have a club in ISL called the Northeast United, but that we just have one Assamese player at the moment playing at the top level. So it's definitely sad to see that side where we also see. Uh, a bit of saying, okay, all states united, but then there's definitely only a Mizoram or a Shillong that will give you the majority of the players. And especially Mizoram being there, they keep sustaining year after year, and they keep churning out players year after year in an I League. Now, when you write about these stories, they are not the happy, good stories, right? They are really going down like a bit of an investigative journalism kind of a thing. Whether it's the story that you wrote on the Assam football, and also, for example, whether you wrote about the legend and the only player, the legend from Nagaland, Talimarinao. So, let's now move to talk about your writing style and the way you write, or the way you prepare for writing down something. Now, I'm sure there's a lot more that as a writer you would want to write in all your articles, but then you limit yourself to what is the most important thing that you want to share as a story. But first, talking about the Assam story that you did, right? What hit you the hardest when you got to know about this? How did you land up on wanting to do this story? And what moved you to write about it? And probably what are the things that you've not written and you still would want to share?
I'm trying to think of what. No, I mean the good thing about football is that people speak very very freely and openly to you. You have to say that. I mean, because I'm talking to people at a level that is not. They have no skin in the game, so to speak. So it's not like I'm speaking to people who are in AIFF or whatever it is. I'm talking to people who are on the ground, coaches and people who run teams and so on. So they can be as open as uh, want them to be. They'll tell you things. I mean, I remember this Assam story was because I knew I had to kind of go back and do. I was following up. I was trying to remember. I think I was following up on. There were two games in Guwahati, and there was a time lag in between them. And I had time. I said, "Listen, let me go and see what's happening in the." And I'd spoken to Siddharth, these guys who run Guwahati FC. It's this new club I saw. I think it was on Twitter or social media somewhere that they're setting up this new parallel sort of a footballing ecosystem for Guwahati, for the city. And I remember speaking to them, and I said, "Look, tell me, who should I speak to? Who are sort of old workers in football in the state? Whom do you know? Whom can I talk to?" And I asked a couple of other people that I had met around when I was doing the Northeast story, in which you found this big hole, that was Assam, and you find this big hole that was Nagaland. And then you found this, and you knew that the northeastern states that were contributing the most were Meghalaya and Mizoram and Manipur. And then there was this, the rest, the four other. And after Bhaichak, we didn't have too many players from Sikkim as well. So you keep asking these people, so tell us the names of these people, tell us who these people are. And then that's where you build, and that's when you sort of get. And the good thing about Indian football, Siju, is that people are so willing to share information, numbers, contacts, even if it's just a lead. They're willing to tell you that, okay, this is what you should do. And I must also say for a moment that my organization at the moment, ESPN at the time, they were very cool about the story being done. They said, listen, if it's a story there, go ahead and do it. And of course, because you're talking about a beautiful landscape, and you can describe it, and you can take pictures, and you can set the scene up, it helps you as a reporter and a journalist to push for a story that you think. I mean, will someone in the in a Guwahati edition of the paper, how will they do that story? They've done it so many times. What's the angle they're going to take on it? I had to do a broad sort of a story in that sense. And these other guys, they're doing their daily beat, and they've seen what happens in any way. So I was in many ways fortunate to be to get that chance to say, okay, this is how I'm going to look at the story, and we're going to see where we can take it, and what we can do. And then that's what happened. And I went on this. I was also planning to go to Kokrajhar, which is like a big Sai center there where a lot of people come from. And Kokrajhar is also known for, they had very, very bad riots at the time. And I wanted to see its connection with sports. So along the way, there was this gentleman in Bondapara who ran that incredible, he ran that incredible camp. And I called him, and he's a police guy, and he said, yes, you must come. It's no problem. Ranjit Das, an ex-policeman, and he said, you turn up. I have this camp, and I run it every day, and it was on the way. So there are all these sort of factors that came together, and you had all these like tons of kids. There must have been like, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 kids. They were there playing. And you're thinking and everywhere you travel through Assam, wherever there's an open patch of land, and a lot of it is just empty patches of land, you'll see kids playing football, not cricket, football, everywhere you go. And you're saying, what's happening here? Why is nothing happening here? Then you hear the story of the Assam Football Association, which is a saga by itself again. And again, it's one organization held by one person. And I remember speaking to that person. He said, "What more do you want me to do?" That was the kind of quote I got from him. I said, why aren't the competitions held, and what is this and whatever. That's what. But there is this kind of entrenched sort of power that is working, and that is controlling it, and that is responsible. Whoever occupies power and does nothing about it, that is what gets reflected in Indian football. That the people in authority are not doing enough. Whatever they're doing is not enough. So that's what you see. I mean, and they said that, look, that in Mizoram, someone told me from the Assam football. They said, look, in Mizoram, people go to Mizoram to get talent, and in Assam now we have to send up our players out to get trials. So that kind of thing. And it's just that the people that run the state association over there, they will blame it on the clubs. The clubs will blame it on somebody else. But if you're not going to give them events to play, and who organizes events in which clubs play? It's the state association. So, and that literally reflects itself everywhere across the country, everywhere, except in some pockets you're getting these things started. And I mean, I talk a lot to Richard Hood as well, who said, who is my sort of consultant guru when it comes to the footballing structures and so on. And he spelled it out. He said, yeah, that's what is there. He said, all that talent is there. It's there in Bengal still. They have so much of football they play at the local level, but it's not channelized properly into a structured sort of proper state league with enough games for young kids to play regularly all around the year. Like what they've started as baby leagues now, which started in Mizoram, by the way, and which they think now is one way to go. But we still seem to think that, we have to have big events, and therefore, we'll all do let's football. So,
Yes, I think Richard Hood is definitely everyone's go-to person, right? I think he's a hood in itself, like an institution in itself for Indian football. Another person that Indian football doesn't deserve, but we are blessed with having him around. Now, when I mentioned about this, right, I was talking a bit more about highlighting on your writing about it, right? So when you have so much information, and I'm just trying to take all the take make the most of this time that you've given us, in case a young writer out there is listening to this, it probably would can benefit. Because so when you have so much information, and okay, you've decided, it's basically like writing a script, right? For a movie or for a show. Writing an article is because you have so much information, you can't write them all. So when you were writing this Assam story, how did you position yourself to incorporate all those thoughts and all those information that you got? And like I mentioned in the start, there must have been something that you had to let go of. So if there was something like that, what was that, and how did you?
yeah. What I wrote eventually, I mean, so Joydita Gupta, Joy, was my colleague. He got the Assam story, and I think he must have cut about 800 words of what I'd originally, of 1,000 words, of what I'd originally written. And what I originally wrote was the entire history of that region, around Bondapara, and the football that they had, right? And also excited to get all this because Ranjit Das said, I'll be there. And 5 other people who worked with Ranjit Das for the last 20, 30 years, they turned up as well. And they had history, and they had stories, and they told you things. And I put everything in. And so then Joy just removed that out. He said, look, the history of it's very interesting if you're writing a book. It's not really interesting if you're writing about that place and that time and that context of what that environment needs, particularly today when the story is being published. So that's what you have to sort of focus on. And you just keep the other stuff sort of, you keep it somewhere in your mind and see what you can do with it. One of the most interesting stories I heard about football in the Northeast is that at one point, India's most wanted was not, Dawood or whoever, Chota Shakil or some gangster. It was not. It was the Ulfa head called Paresh Barua, right? And Paresh Barua, nobody knew where he was, and he was missing, and he was this, that, and the other, and whatever, and everyone was looking for him. And Paresh Barua used to play football in the past, and one of his teammates became like an interlocutor in some discussion that they had with him and everything. Anyway, so there's a journalist called Rajiv Bhattacharya who's based in Guwahati, who traveled, who's written this in his book, and I spoke to Rajiv Bhattacharya. I got the book, I read it. He traveled in the jungles from his family. He went missing. Like his family didn't know where he was for months because he was in the jungles. And he went and found. He traveled for more than 3 months in eastern Nagaland to meet with the armed insurgents, and he interviewed Paresh Barua, and on that day, and there were 10 other insurgent groups that had come, and they were signing a pact and to make like a united front and whatever it was and all that. So because all these other groups that were there, these insurgent groups, they had Nagas, they had Bodos, they had Manipuris, and Barua was this sort of head of Ulfa, right? So he wanted the United Liberation Front of Assam, and they were all then said, okay, let's have a football match, and they played a football match against each other, and Paresh Barua was a goalkeeper. And so in the story that I was writing about it, is that the Manipuris won that match 4-2. And I just loved that story. I thought it was such a fantastic story, but it couldn't get used because it wasn't part of the like the larger narrative or whatever. But I just found it so funny that in the middle of this absolute madness, in the middle of the jungles of eastern Nagaland, there was this historic pact that was being signed between the Ulfa leader and 10 insurgent group to form one united front or whatever it was. And they decided to mark this occasion by playing football. I just love that story, but the story never got used. But it's there in my head, like it's still there. I'll use it sometime. So that's one of the stories that I didn't write, but I just absolutely love it. It's my absolutely favorite story around Northeast football, unprinted so far, so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I must say that I am more ecstatic and pleasured once again and privileged to say that you heard it first on the Total Indian Football Show. Unscripted, but here you've heard Sharda live say, even if it was not the entire thing, but you heard excerpts first right here. Thank you so much for that. I think it's crazy, right? I mean, if you actually dig deeper into the Indian football history as well, just like you mentioned, and I think we needed an outsider to do that. You keep calling yourself that, and I absolutely love the fact that you dig up these stories, and that just gets, like I said, the lens. It's so good to see Indian football to the lens of Sharda. And when you were sharing that story, it somewhere related to like the whole Escobar story, right? I mean, the way Escobar was in love with football, and he had a team, and wow, we have our own. I mean, not a Narcos, but we have something similar. you know, maybe
He's a
maybe
seriously,
once.
I think he's still the most wanted person or something. He's like very, very high on that list of people, of an Ulfa leader. And I think Reboti Fukan was the name of his teammate or something like that, who became like the interlocutor and was speaking to him and so on and on. And anything else will come up about Paresh Barua, you will find that football will be connected to it somehow. There'll be some footballing connection. Like it's just wild. It's just mad. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. And well, the other story that I must talk about is the story that you wrote about Taliraman Au, right? And um, when I read the story, I must say this on the show that I have taken a printout of the entire article and have documented it. Just a couple of articles that I've done that so far. And yes, when people, I'm sure you must have read this, and all of you must have gone through this. If not, please go through it. It's on the espn.in. It has a video to it, like a 4 minute and 18-second video talking about, in short, about the write up. But when I read the entire piece, Sharda, I was like, wow, this is definitely worth a short documentary, right? Documenting the entire thing. Yes, that you said you've written 4 minutes. There's a video of that, but it was such a beautifully written. I mean, I am not a writer, so I am short of words, or have rather adjectives to even describe what the article, the piece was. It was brilliantly written, a beautiful story where you just, while reading it, it's straight out of a book, right? A chapter from a book. And you were with the family, you spent time with the family, you spent time in his village. Again, take us through that period of taking their stories from the sons, from the wife, meeting other people in the locality, and yeah, some more stories that you were not allowed to write in this one.
It's not like you don't get allowed, they just get edited out because it doesn't sort of fit in. And eventually you sort of cry about it, but when you look at it later, you say, no, it's fine. It actually was a correct edit that happened. I mean, that also was thank you for all those great.
And
Yeah.
I must tell you, Sharda, that you always have the totally Indian football show for such kind of things. So to share to the world, we are right here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So, that piece was part of the whole Northeast football sort of story that was there. And I said, look, I'll go and meet this person. And I was very fortunate that I got in touch with Ankush Saikia, who wrote the article for, I think, for Scroll on Talimera now originally. He put me in touch with the family and so on. And then we were able to go. And I think we can't really understand sort of the greatness of these people until we don't put ourselves into the context of where they came from. Right now, I can understand that a lot of young reporters will say, look, but I didn't get a chance to go there. I didn't get a chance, and I won't get a chance to go to Nagaland at office money and speak to this thing. And it is true. That is the fact. And I just felt blessed that I got a chance to do this. And because we had set up this meeting with the son, with his eldest son, and I can't explain to you how Nagaland at the time I went, maybe it has changed, I don't think it has, functioned in terms of this parallel economy that ran alongside it, where everybody basically paid a cut to this underground people that are there, and they still did and they still do. And it's this parallel economy that, and no, you can't start a business, you can't do anything if you don't have some kind of sort of equation with those people. And Talimaran Ao, what surprised me was that there was nothing to mark his enormous sort of career that he had and the kind of person that he was. And I went to his family, and they had very sweetly, they didn't realize that there were three of us coming. There was me, there's a photographer, there's a video guy. Right. And they had very sweetly made a little gift to give me, like a mug with his picture on it from the Ao family, which is very, very lovely. And my two friends, I think, what, we didn't get anything. But and that video, and it's a huge, sprawling, lovely, lovely property. It's out of the main city of Dimapur, which is sort of dark and grey, and Dimapur is very, very interesting. And another wonderful thing about that you can't write, because they speak a language called Nagamese, which is a mix of Naga and Assamese and maybe a little Bengali, and it's like a pidgin kind of a language that they speak. And Dimapur has its own sort of subculture of sort of slightly on the edge, kind of a living that there is. And just outside it, there is this spectacular beauty where the landscape has just taken over, and it's bigger than anything around you, huge trees and birds. And I remember we were going through, I've written about this actually, so it's not really a secret. I think I put everything into, other than that Paresh Barua story, I put everything into the article. We were going somewhere, and the photographer said that, look, I think if somebody came and kidnapped us, we would somebody he said people could come here with guns and kidnap us, and no one will know where we've gone. It was like that. So it's a little bit Wild West kind of a place that is there. But at the same time, you had this family that has lived through these decades with this father whom they didn't really know or understand. There was a certain amount of distance from him, and they never recognized him as the person in those photographs and the person whom we had come to meet and to see, and so on. But by the time we kind of finished with the moment that their mother and their sister, they don't meet, the mother didn't meet people anymore, like so Dr. Ao's wife, Dr. Tladimana, she never met anyone, right? And we wanted to meet her, and she was in Kohima, and she didn't come. We said, can we go and meet her, we'll be there. And but she won't meet people, she won't sort of receive people, as they said, either because she may have had a bad experience, we don't know. She was just not into sort of publicity or media or whatever. And she lives with one of the sisters there. But three of the two brothers and a sister, they came to meet us. And and we're saying, but how come there's no statue? We're asking stupid questions, how come there's no statue? How come there's no stamp? Eventually there was a stamp made after Dr. Ao, in after a couple of years, when there was some, I think it was his, around 2018 they did something around that time. They said they were going to do something. We read your article. Someone sent me a mail, etc. And anyhow, so whatever it was, he got sort of recognized for who he was. And the remarkable thing about him was that this was a practicing doctor. This was his thing. And you're talking about a time he used to live where he had to walk up and down hills to get from X to home, you know. This is an extremely, I don't know, almost a Renaissance man kind of a person he was when I think about it. I have his picture. This people may not know. All my friends know. I have his picture as a wallpaper of my telephone, and everyone says, "Who is this?" And I said, "It's the India's first football captain." And it just seems an extraordinary person. And I think every time we meet people or meet people who know people who are part of our sporting history, I think we must sort of soak in as much as we can possibly get. And they had all his stuff kept behind, so there would have been stuff that the wife would have had in Kohima, but the kids had a lot of stuff too. And they were just, I think their pride, and maybe they didn't get along with their dad as well as they would have wanted to when he was alive, but I think the pride that they felt in him, you could see it was genuine pride, you know. And now you're looking at it and saying that Nagaland's had such a troubled history with the Indian state, but you had this person who was able to straddle those two boundaries and live. And the Indian army came and told Dr. Ao that you shouldn't treat insurgents. And he said, "I'm a doctor. I'll treat whoever is ill. I don't check who they are, you know." I mean, extraordinary stories. And similarly, you will find things happening in Kashmir as well. So I followed that Kashmir football story as well. So I'm quite intrigued by these things. And yeah, I don't think it's written enough in a way. And what's happening now is that because our football is, if you will allow me a digression, because our football has turned into ISL and whatever, this marketed, manufactured thing, you're going to lose. And I mean, a guy like Novi's gone. You know, Jaideep Basu's still around. God bless him, and God bless everybody who can keep these stories for us. I mean, Jaideep Basu's book should be reprinted. I don't know, somebody should get it somewhere and reprint it again, because otherwise those stories are gone. Anything that's pre-internet is gone. You know, we have to remember that, and try and somehow keep it alive, and through oral history or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was listening to, again, a plugin. I mean, it's not paid, but I must say that what you brought up here about whatever is pre internet is lost. And I think it's a bad habit that India has in terms of the sporting side of it. I don't know about the others, that we are not a country that archives, right? And this is something I was listening to Gaurav Kapoor's 22 Yarns featuring Harsha Bogle, where he was talking about his career as a broadcaster and a commentator. And he often mentioned this point throughout, because he was like, he's worked for the BBC, and all of these guys have archives, you know, they have all documented, but unfortunately we don't. And if Harsha Bogle is talking about cricket not being documented enough, I mean, you can only see where Indian football lies there then. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, the names that you mentioned, we've, again, a person like Novi Kapadia, the way he was treated with the whole ISL folks or whatever, like, you know, it's just gone, right? One fine day you just hear him and he's just gone.
Yeah, imagine being treated like that by ISL people. Say, what is wrong with you? Make a statue of Novi and Jaideep. Yeah, what are you doing? Yeah, you know, just give them some award. Just do something. Are you crazy or what? You know?
Definitely. And my last bit about that I wanted to ask you was, so what is your take on the referees in India? Because you also have written.
I did a story on the referees, no? Yeah, I mean, you know, I was in a way I was indulged a lot by my office. I have to be grateful for that, and on account of that, I got a lot of goodwill about what I wrote about Indian football from a lot of people, particularly young people like you, Siju, and which is great. I'm happy to be doing it. I mean, and I'm just looking at the story of the referees. All I'm hearing is people are bitching and whining and moaning about the referees and say they're shit and they're used. I said, no, no, one second, one second. What do they do? How much do they get earned? What kind of a profession is it? And let's find out about that. And of course, no one would speak to you on record, but of course, we'll get people to talk to you off record. You know, And so and they did. And what it worked, it was like this football network. I called up X, who suggested I talk to Y and tell him that X had told me that he will tell X, he will tell Y that I will be calling him, so he used to speak to me, that kind of thing. And you will get information. And you think, okay, why can't you look after referees? All this money that you're getting, FIFA is giving, where's the money going? Okay, so you will always blame state associations that are doing this, state associations that are doing that. I mean, for all BCCI's many flaws, they run a very good umpiring course. They run a very good scorers course. They run all that kind of. They have that other sub network that's there. So what is happening in football? So I wanted to know what that was like, because it's not a hard thing to do, and it's not even a very expensive thing to do. So you're saying, like, why can't you pay these guys? Why are you getting people from outside? My other one big massive gripe is like, what is wrong with our coaches? Why they cannot coach ISL teams? Why can't we have Indian coaches coaching ISL teams, which you have a couple, and whenever they sack some foreigner, then the assistant becomes the coach. You know, so who happens to be Indian. So I just find that also strange, because it's not. I mean, I don't know what people are, and I mean, the whole thing is that the difference between cricket coaching and football coaching is ginormous. Like, there's no comparison. What I love about football is that the bichara managers get hammered every day at press conference. In cricket coaches will say, we are building, we are regenerating, we are reconstructing, and it'll go on for season after season. They get away with it. In football, it is match, 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 out. Like that. Maybe not in some cases, but still, a lot of the time, mostly that's what it is. So my referee story was that, that if football players who are playing current football, if they tell me the referee is bad, I'll believe them if they're having a bad. But a lot of the times, players think the referee is bad if a decision goes against them, and he's good if the decision goes in their favor. So we shouldn't take it a lot like some great. I mean, of course, there are mistakes committed. You can see it, but there has to be a way to train and get better. Are you always going to import people to play in your league, which you want now to last for, what is it, 28 rounds or something you have to have? 28 matches per team or something like that. There's a rule that's coming. So is that what you're going to do? You're going to outsource? Hello, people outsource Indians. What are you doing? You can sort this out, yeah. It's not so difficult. The problem is that these referees don't get enough games to referee in at a lower level to get practice. And why don't they get those games to referee in at a lower level to get practice? Because there is no a state league or local league or all these other leagues that have to be there. Why they're not there? Then we are going back to the same question again, as to how you're going to run your game. Are you giving in your kids? Are you giving, never mind giving referees, are you giving children age of 10 onwards enough games to play every year so that they get better? No. And when you're not giving children those games, they don't have referees to stand in those games. So therefore, your referees get minimum number of matches to get ready and to get actual on ground sort of training and apprenticeship and to move up. And then it's the same cycle. So a lot of things turn around and come back to, half asleep administration looking in the wrong direction of what they need to do. And there's talent everywhere. I'm not saying we're going to win World Cup or qualify or whatever, but there's talent to be a decent team in Asia. Yeah, come on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, it all boils down not just for referees. When you talk about game down, it boils down for everything, right? Even for our coaches, whether it's our players, everyone. I mean, the root cause over here for not anyone not to improve is game time, because our senior team itself plays how many games? Our senior team players get how many matches, right? Our national team captain just plays 20 games odd, and if he doesn't make it to the if his team doesn't make it to the top 4 and all of that, and then he's just done with, right? And adding to that, if he's not in a good form, then you're dropped off. So all of those, right?
You've got your league. We could start on the league also, no? You could start on the league also,
Yeah.
right? On your league system that you
Yes.
have in place. Yeah, but anyway,
Yes,
that is
absolutely.
another topic for another.
Yes, and I'm sure, I think my last question, because I have to ask you this. You are a Mumbai girl, right? Any story that you have up your sleeve regarding Mumbai football, or any plans that you would want to?
No, no, actually not. No, actually not. The one story I'm quite curious about writing or whatever is writing about, Darren Caldera, now who I've got to know through strange sort of set of circumstances. Darren Caldera, Kunal Majgaonkar, and one more footballer. They all grew up in the same housing colony
Keenan.
in
Keenan.
Keenan, correct, yes, in the same housing colony in
Andheri.
in Andheri, East. So I mean that's a that to my mind is like, oh, I must follow that kind of thing. But there's no other story such, because I don't have that sort of depth or level of knowledge that was there for me to. I mean, we knew that boys in Stanislaus played hockey. Stanislaus boy played hockey. I'm trying to remember what. And we had a cricket team in this thing. And Cooperage was this ground where you had to go because of action and there was always fighting. And I remember Mahindra's was the team that everyone was talking about. And then the team just packed up and it kind of folded. I don't really have Bombay football stories, which is because we had, I think Mr. Bhaskaran was writing for Midday at the time. He was covering football when I was a young reporter starting out. So I think it was Mr. Bhaskaran, if I'm not wrong. I remember there was Cecil Hendricks also. So you had these real old stalwarts that were there who were covering the game. So we didn't kind of go in that direction. And they weren't interested in cricket. So I was happy to be in that little empty space. So I'm afraid I must disappoint you there, Siju.
No, no worries. I think there's still more writings coming up from Sharda, in the coming years. And if not, probably I'll give you an idea. And maybe if we can collaborate, I mean, that would be my dream. But yeah, and like
You
you
must, you
mentioned,
must. I must
yeah,
tell you one story I'm really proud of having done. Really proud of having done is a story I did on the Iranian women's football team that came to play in this AFC Women's Asian Cup, because there was no information to be got for them from anywhere, like nowhere. I must have chased 25 leads. I have a list of everyone whom I asked, everybody, tell me something, till I finally found a journalist based in Vienna, he's a sports editor of a newswire service. Then he was the guy who was able to give me some information. And I spoke to this girl in Tehran via WhatsApp to find out, about futsal and something and the other. I mean, that so the futsal stuff didn't get over there. It was just like a nightmare. And there was another guy from Iran, a journalist, who kept sending me links and says, do Google Translate. And that's how I worked that story. I was so proud. I've never been proud of any story I've done other than that, because it was so hard to get information. Yeah.
brilliant. I think you answered. I mean, I was getting into my last segment, which, is, I'm calling it the rapid four because I find rapid five to be very mainstream. So let me do a rapid four. And I think the first question over there was favorite article so far. So I think you've already answered that. So I'm going to take that piece on Iranian women's team that you've written as the answer to that. The next question is, we are in an era of podcasts as well, and you are part of one as a regular member. Now you are part of this as well. So, when if I had to ask you, podcast or write,
Writing, always.
last article you wish to write. If today Sharda was giving up, or not giving up, but retiring from writing anymore, what would that article be?
I'm actually have to write something now, which I've been dawdling over 2 3 days. So that's on hockey, which I haven't finished. Last article I have to write. Oh, what a good question that is. So, as in, do I die after that article or do I retire only?
No, no, retire or
Because the answer
yeah.
for both those are different.
Yeah. Retire. I mean, you're like, now I'm like, okay, let me explore something else. I'm done writing sports,
I'm
stuff
not
that.
going to retire. I can always write. No, I'm not going to stop. I won't. I won't be able to stop. Whether anyone will read it or not, I won't be able to stop. That's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the answer we all wanted to hear, that you never stop writing. How would you want to be remembered?
Uh, as a bloody good journalist. I mean, other than my friends and all that, no, like from at a professional level, just a bloody good journalist.
I think that you've
Other than
already,
sort of, my friends and whatever.
yeah, I think you already earned that title from many of them. So, Sharda Ugra, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I would want to end this episode on one of your writings that you have written on this definitely Talimarinao. But what caught my eye was this particular sentence, and I am sure it is something that, as you rightly said right now, you would love to be remembered as a bloody good journalist. I think even this sentence kind of fits in well for you as well. It says a phantom figure who hovers over the football history of free India. His footprints have faded, but the name is resonant and powerful in the collective memory of his people. And this is about Talimara now, but if I had to say, your writings may fade. I mean, writings will never fade. That's not the right thing I must say. But your footprints may have faded, but I'm sure your writings will forever stay in the collective memory of the people, if it's Indian football or whether it's cricket. Thank you so much, Sharda. Thank you for the time. I could not have expected a better way to start this special series. The stories that you've shared and anecdotes that you've shared, I think this episode definitely celebrates you as Sharda. I hope you enjoyed as much as I was blessed to have you on the show.
Thank you, Siju. Thank you so much for this. Thank you for being so generous with your words and so kind, and I just love being on your show and talking to everybody. Thank you so much again.
Thank you to all the listeners. Thank you so much. I hope, just like I mentioned in my announcement video, that this series will not disappoint you. And I'm sure this episode, the first one of the series, has kept you hooked on to what's coming ahead. So thank you so much to all our listeners. Please show us the love by following and subscribing to the Totally Indian Football Show, available on all the leading audio platforms. I'm your host, Siju, and you are listening to the Totally Indian Football Show. Thank you very much.